It is my privilege that we can continue our study about the family. We have today the subtitle Preparing for Change. We have seen that the founder of the family is God, and as everything is made with a purpose, the family was made to serve together, to serve God together. And by fulfilling that purpose, multiplication of happiness and of the family members would happen. The means that brings those things is the only one that is the love of God with all its ingredients. The source can be only God. The beginning, God set when marriage starts, and the end, unfortunately, came through the wrong decisions of Adam and Eve. And so with death, marriage ends, and also when adultery or physical violence occur. Now, we have seen that decisions are that which determine our life. Everything that we do is a result of our thoughts and decisions. And we have decisions with far-reaching effect, like career choice, choice of friends, or choice of a spouse, or less far-reaching effect decisions would be what should I eat today, or when should I do the garden, or to which workshop should I go. All those are less far-reaching decisions. But today we want to study about preparing, the education, and seeing how to do that. It was never so much offering of education tools in this world like it is today. There's all kinds of further education that is offered that people go into. There are kinds of courses they take for pre-marriage, marriage, after marriage. There is so much of a things that are out there for educating and preparing. But in the end, it looks like it doesn't help at all. Because the more people prepare or the more they do, it looks like they go more down. It doesn't help. And that's the truth. If we don't know how to prepare, if we don't know what matters in life, then of course, all preparation is just picking the leaves of a tree, leaving the roots out of it. And so, with all the good intentions that a couple comes together to marry, if they don't know why a relationship is there, if they don't know what's going on in their hearts, if they don't know themselves, all preparation, all courses of, I would say, let's say things like this, or let's say it with this color, or let's say it with that color, it's all not going to work. Because the problem and the issue of men is a root problem, not a branch problem or a leaf problem. So let us look the two things that man needs to know and they don't know. The first of all is the law of God. We have in this universe a fundamental law that nothing can exist of itself, and everything in this universe needs to take in order to give. Since God is unselfish, He lives for giving. He is the only one who does not need to take. He made everything to live for giving, but every creature must take first in order to give. This simple law, which would enlighten us all in all our education and in all our relationships, would just change everything in our life if we understand it and apply it. And then there is the other point that people don't know and Christians don't know, is the state of man at his birth. We are born poor, miserable, wretched, bond, blind, and naked. we are born in a state of helplessness. So, not knowing the law and not knowing how we start from the beginning, how shall we ever get to prepare for the relationships? So, these two things must be the basis of our study. We have seen in our last presentation that if we have the right identity that God gave us as a creature of God, love is the means that we need to take from God through trust. That trust is not a choice. I hope that that came through in my last presentation. When God created the universe, and when He created humans and angels and beings with a spirit, there was no alternative to whom to trust except to God. And so trust is the taking. It can never be a choice to trust or not to trust. We must trust. That is, we must bind ourselves to a source. And this binding is a lawful binding. Adam had it naturally. He did not need to think about it because it was never a question. So while he was bound to God in this legal dependency binding, his decisions were all correct and free. He only could eat from the wrong fruit because he unplugged himself from God and put his trust in Lucifer or in his wife. So before he could eat, he must trust. Yes, until Lucifer, there was no alternative. Everyone trusted God. But Lucifer brought the alternative and says, you can trust me, my way is better than God's way. And so God is open. If there is a better way, He would go it. And so He allows to put man, because trust is our own exercise, He allowed Adam to put his trust in his wife, and Eve to put his trust in Lucifer. And now the result is that their decisions come as unfree and wrong because they are in an unlawful binding. So, understanding the law, we know no one can take any decision without being dependent on a source to trust. It's impossible. This is so crucial to understand so that we may know why we decide and what we do. And if we don't have this basic knowledge of how our subconscious works and how God made us to work, then we can forget all preparation. It will not work. In a crisis, it will come up and it will be visible that our bindings are unlawful and our actions are incorrect and unfree. So the most important thing that I need to explain to my patients and that I need to explain in the teachings is that humans have a spiritual dependency. And the way I try to explain it is as a child develops and works in a mother. Because where shall you start with preparation? It must start somewhere, and I think we should start when a child becomes a child. So when the two half cells meet in the tube, then they go and come together, then they become one cell. And the spirit who is with the cell becomes one spirit, half of mother, half of father. We don't see the spirit, but we see that the cell starts to grow and to multiply, and it must be someone who governs that multiplying. And so they come up into the uterus, and there the body of the child, or from the child, it goes the umbilical cord to bind itself to mother's tissue. So this is 100% need to take. It's 100% dependency. Everything that the body of the child needs, that those cells need to not only multiply but grow and become a human, is taken from the physical needs, are taken from the mother's womb. Is there a choice for that? Of course not. There was never a choice in whom is the source for our needs. And so we have here the mother, of course, has also a source. She cannot, her body doesn't live from nothing. So she must take her needs from nature. And so the child takes from the mother's body, and it has no choice to take it somewhere else. And no matter what the mother eats or drinks or inhales, the child, if it goes through the placenta, the child must take it and put it into his body. But even before the child attaches itself into the mother's womb, the spirit of the child attaches to the spirit of the mother, because he cannot live by a force from himself. So he attaches to that, and what the mother thinks, what the mother has in her spirit, he by trust, and that's why trust is no choice, takes it and it gives and comes into its body. So the child has no choice to trust or not to trust. It must trust and bind itself to its mother's spirit. And we see that if the spirit always conducts the human being and conducts the human body, it must do it from the beginning. And so from the beginning, the spirit of the child governs the whole development and makes it possible that the child's body grows. Because what he gives, what he takes from mom and he gives into his body. That's why it grows. And if mother has a sad spirit, if mother has certain issues, evidently it will show up in the development of a child. Why do we have natal diseases? Why do we have children who are born too early? Or why do we have all these malfunctions? It is because the spirit of the child is dependent on its mother's spirit. And if there would be, all right, if there would be that need that God put there in our mind, the love of God, if that would be there, of course, everything would work fine. Now we live under grace, and if we would not live under grace, we would not exist. So God keeps the life of the child and the life of us by His power, even though we have so much that is wrong. It is just a miracle that we exist. But God lets come through more and more in this day that we see the result of that dependency. Now, mother, is she independent of a spiritual source? Or must she also trust someone in order that she might give to her body? So, mother needs to trust. But to whom does mother trust to take? Where is the binding of mother there? And so, she usually is bound to her husband, to her mother or father, and all others. And we have seen what a terrible situation that is when a mother is bound to her husband. When the mother is bound to her husband and her husband is not home and the husband doesn't do the things right, then we might think, oh, what happens? We must be so clear. What is the purpose of our relationship? Do we have our husband, our mother and father on the source side? on the taking side or on the giving side. And if you don't know the law, and by our sinful nature, by our error in our minds, we automatically bind to them. And that's what's then us with us. We are miserable. And then the child is miserable because it has no choice. So we must come to quit that. That's the wrong dependency. And God must take the place of that. And if you don't know that a mother should not be dependent on her husband for spiritual things, then how can ever the child develop well? Now, like I said, it's a miracle that children exist and that we exist in spite of the separation from God that the mothers have been bound to humans for their life. Now, after 9 months, usually, the body of the child comes out of the mother's womb. We separate the umbilical cord, and now the child needs to take its sources from nature. Yes, there is a time of unweaning from the mother's womb, a time where the child has to take the milk from mother, but that is a limited time. And so as it grows, the mother's body is not enough. And so it needs to take from a bigger thing, that's nature. So the source must always be bigger than the individual. And so the child takes from nature now. So mother can eat what she wants, she can drink what she wants. After the child is not sucking anymore the milk, everything is fine. But what happens with the spiritual umbilical cord of the child? How does that come away from mom? And that is only possible as the child is taught by the mother to do that. And that is an education process. And most mothers don't know that. Most fathers don't know how a child develops. And so they don't know how it works. They don't see that there is a spiritual umbilical cord, even though it's evident that the child cannot live spiritually without her mom. I could see all the diseases that the child has in its body comes because the mother is dependent on a father or mother is not present. I had that case where that mother came with a 2-year-old child to me, and she said she behaves strangely. And I said, yes, because you're not at home. She was a medical student, and it was her dream to become a doctor. And I said to her, you either take your child into your university, or you must stay with it. Your need to become a doctor is a non-essential need. But this child cannot survive without you. It might survive because it binds itself to others, but it will have great harm in its life because there is no choice for the child to bind to grandma or to bind to another one as a primary source. Mother must be there. Why do we have sick children? Exactly because mothers are either not happy or the children are separated from them. Unfortunately, this lady took it serious and she quit her medical school and gave the time that God gave her and the responsibility to God in caring for that child. So that's so important that we know the spiritual dependence. And now mother needs to educate its child to unwind his spiritual cord, because the child's spirit does it, from her and binds it to trust in God. That's what the purpose of education is to understand in whom do I trust. Then decisions are okay. Then I am aware if everything I take from God, then I can never do a wrong decision. I can never marry the wrong person. I can never have the wrong career. I can never have the wrong friends. It never happens. But children are not educated in this way. There is not seen that they have a blind eye. They have an idea that they are gods. And so the child binds itself to take to father as well. Then it adds the grandmother. Then it adds every other relationship. It adds in order to take. That's why all our relationships that we have are dependent relationships. They are inflexible relationship, and that's why when something happens in them, we are destroying ourselves. So the child is not aware what it does in its subconscious, but at the same time, it says, I need to be loved from mom, I need to be loved from father, I need to be loved from grandmother, from my brother, and it claims, and it also claims love from God if it's a believing person. So it's all about claims. It's all about rights. We don't see that a creature has no rights. It's so debased, this change of the heart of man. We think we are gods, and so that's why we give in order to receive. This is a total illusion. It's impossible. No one can ever give anything from himself that he not took before. Your life you cannot give because it was never yours, but you can give it because you took it, you received it from God. Your body is not yours. Nothing that we do is ours. And everything we do has a source where we take it from first. We must understand that taking is first and then give. But since we have this illusion in our heart, we don't see where we take from. We don't see that we're bound to mother, to father, to spouse, to child, to parent. We don't see that this, our relationship, are our destiny. They are our destiny. And this is not known to man. And this being unknown to man, we live in a self-deception, in an unknowledge of ourselves. And we don't see that all our problems come because of a wrong way of relationships. We go into relationships with everyone we have, with spouse, with father, with mother, with children, with pets, not in order to give, but in order to receive or to be loved, to get something from them. And some people even think that works. And they say, well, it's both in a relationship. This is the unknowledge of the law. When they say both, they don't know that they say you can walk forward and backwards at the same time. Because that's what they express when they say both, to love and to be loved. It's not working. It's not working. There is either a way I go and love, and then I must take from somewhere first, and then I give nothing from me to my spouse, to my father, to my mother, to my children, to my pets. So what they do with it, it's their issue. Yes, if they love, then they must also take that love from somewhere. And if both love, yes, the relationship works. But both go into the relationship to be loved. And that's why the error says in us, the acts of others and the existence of others determine your life. That never can be. Because we are individuals. We were made to govern our lives by ourselves. But if we don't know how relationship works, if we don't know where the problem of man is, we will just go always into the wrong direction. And all our preparation for whatever we do for a course is not going to work when it is tested. When it's tested. So let us see what is the basis, the foundation of all preparation. There is one thing. If we miss that, that is the root issue. If we miss the knowledge of the law of God, then we are loveless and selfish. So the law of God shows that only love works. It shows that when we give, we are happy. It shows that altruism, unselfishness, is that what fulfills life. That's why God in His wisdom gave to the Israelites His commandments. And of course, if we take the commandments literal, we might be very confused. We might think we keep the law, like a lady said, I unconsciously kept 8 of the 10 commandments before she got converted. Now, if she says that I unconsciously kept 8 commandments before I got converted, she does not know that the law is one. And in this Bible verse in Deuteronomy 6, it's God who speaks. And it says, now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it. And look what it says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Now, if you don't understand what that means, because we have no rule of interpretation, we might think we must go to God to love Him in order to give Him something. But we must know in every action of fulfilling our needs, it's 2 actions you need to take first and then give. I go and take the water or the food and then I give it. You cannot keep it for yourself. So to eat is, or to take is to love God, because you must love Him with all thine heart, because that's where your lawful binding is. And with all thy soul, that's where you live from. And that where all your power is, there you go to the power source. So when a person loves God, he does not love God to give Him something. It's less like you love to eat bread or to drink water. God is the source to take. That's the dependency. And that's one Lord. That's why it's so precise. The Lord our God is one Lord. There is one source where you take from. God could have written 100 commandments, and He could have not said more than that. So He said that 10 would suffice us, that when we go to other gods, when we break the 7th commandment, when we do adultery or kill or whatever, it's always because we do not take from Him. So the literal precepts are just a result of where we take from. Only the 4th commandment shows that we are a creature and we have a birthday, and that's birthday we have to acknowledge that we must take first before we can give. This is why in this chapter God only brings the 1st commandment out. Because if this is kept, everything is kept. This is the one commandment that matters. Because the law doesn't permit to you to keep love for you. Because the Bible says love doesn't think on itself. Love is unselfishness. Love does not work for it. Because love is taken in order to give. Our needs are not for us. They are there to be given. So here, God gives the one commandment. That's the law. And that's an eternal one. The precepts of the 10 commandments will fall away when this earth has its finished. But the law that is behind it, never. That's why if we don't take those 10 words as the law, we are very confused. This is why not understanding that the letter of the law is not the law will bring us into great confusion. People think they keep the law while they are blind, like the Israelites, that they are bound in his heart not to God, but to humans and animals. It's a disaster that Christians take and put in front of their churches the 10 precepts and have no idea what they mean. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt take from him what your heart needs, what your soul needs, and what gives you power so that you can give it, because it's not for you. Love does not live for itself. And now, and these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, because there is the law written, take to give. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. How many children do know the law today? I was grown up in a Adventist family. I was grown up and my parents were very eager to keep the external letters of the law. But no one taught me the law. And love was not present. They divorced after having 4 children. If their hearts would have been bound to God, how could they ever be rude to each other? How could they ever not understand its other's failures, its other weaknesses? If you are bound to God, we know, and out of us comes love. But you see, there are people who say today, I keep the commandments. Let's prove it. Because the Bible says in 1 John 2 and 3, that he who does not love his neighbor does not know God. He who cannot love does not know God, because he has not that binding, that is that lawful binding where he takes the power in order to give it. It is not there. It is not there. How then can you teach it to your children? Now, I was taught the law. I went to church and it was taught and preached, but no one kept it. Because love was not visible. Look to your church today, but better look to your own heart and see if love is visible. If love comes out of you, then you're in the right binding. Then your decisions are correct. Then your teaching is perfect. And you're prepared to live. Thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. But how can you do that when you don't know that? You have to talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. So, dependency on God is that main issue that needs to be understood. Dependency on God. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, because that what you take from, that you give. And at a frontlets between thine eyes. Now people bind the 10 commandments in the letter in front of their eyes, and they have no idea what they mean. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. There is something that we need to know first before we do any preparation, before we do any courses of how and not how. We need to know the law and our state of mind when we are born. We need to know that. If you don't know that, all our teachings is worthless. All our schools teach nonsense. If we do not have in the center the understanding of the dependency of God. And this is the main issue of all humans. Everything depends on whom I am attached to. And if I'm attached to a human, then out of me comes a human work. Out of me comes a human love, not a divine one. May we understand that all those courses might be done with well intention, but usually they miss the center of it, and so they become worthless. That's why the devil is in the educating and the preparing business, because he makes the courses so that you don't understand what really matters. And then you think you're prepared. I did so much study medicine, but I was unprepared when I started in my practice because I didn't know humanity. I didn't know what's the problem, why we get sick. I didn't know why we live like we live. So if God would have had that mercy to show me the law and how things work, I would have never been able to help or to teach what matters. So hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord, or take from him with all thine heart, that is, you're totally bound to him, and with all thy soul, that is, you're totally connected to him, and with all thy strength, that is, no one can do anything that you can be separated from him. This is what matters. This is the one thing that makes all the difference in education. And maybe that what is in the center of our life. Amen.